You telling me if I came out of the ground and I looked like this, you wouldn't fall in love?
I would fall in love with you immediately.
Some
I'd be like, I can fix him. Hi, I'm Lisa Swallows. And we're the Ghouls Next Door. We're your dead boyfriend next door.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can say words again I normally.
The media literacy show from a horror lens, where we explore the real life, historical, and romantical reasonings behind our cinematic fears. And continuing our monstrous love series, we are talking about the will be a cult classic. I guess not a cult classic. People like it. But the dark comedy Lisa Frankenstein from last year, 2024.
You telling me if I came out of the ground and I looked like this, you wouldn't fall in love?
I would fall in love with you immediately. I'd be
like,
I can fix him. I can fix him. The movie. No, he was more like, I can fix. He was like, let me help you fix me, and I'll fix you on the way.
Yeah, he definitely fixed her a lot too, emotionally. So
yeah, and she just gave him some parts. Yeah, it worked.
Murder.
Mutually assured construction.
Yeah. Oh, that's cute. Look at you. You're so good at words.
Thanks. I have a whole show.
Yeah. What?
So we're talking about Lisa Frankenstein, which is a dark comedy film. And when we were watching it, I was like, you know what? I don't think we're the dark comedy audience. I don't think it's for us. For real. I liked it. I'm not saying I didn't like it. I totally got it. That was cute. But there was a good part of it where I was like, I'm not like enjoying myself the way that like people must really do.
Yeah.
And it's similar to how I felt with Heathers, whereas like people really love it and it's that dark comedy that people like, and I'm like, it's still like to me.
Yeah. I think I went into it with the wrong headspace. I don't know. I didn't expect it to be serious either. Yeah. But I think I expected it to be different than what it was. And maybe that's on me. I don't know. But like, it was cute. Like, there are parts that I liked, but I was also like, oh, that's sad. I feel bad for everyone who has to experience this, like, emotionally.
For sure.
Specifically, Taff.
Yeah. And I think that's its purpose. And I really enjoyed that part of it. There was a lot that I wasn't expecting. Like, it could have been very, like, just, start to finish the same kind of idea, like what people were expecting. And it wasn't that. It did really feel original and fun. Like, people were having fun in it. And it was just different. And it exists in its own little world that I feel like Diablo Cody likes to write that way. Yeah. Right? Like, it's an adjacent world to ours, but this one's just a little more goofy. And I was surprised by how I resonated with characters. It didn't feel cliche, and even parts that were just really outrageous and silly, it was like, this is a fun time.
Yeah. No.
So I think I liked it more than Heathers.
For sure. With that as well.
Yeah. But I do there's just times where it was like the dark comedy aspects of it. It was like, oh, I don't think we really like that. I don't think we really.
Which, because of the scientific end, it's surprising for both of us that it doesn't resonate as much, because it should, like, mathematically should. We should.
Yeah, we love horror comedy. Yeah, I think there's just like a specific like brand of dark comedy, like that. When it's labeled dark comedy, that's where I'm like, ugh. Like, I don't know. It just misses me, which is, again, totally fine. Not knocking it at all. I, again, really enjoyed it. I thought it was super cute. I loved everyone in it. I thought there was some genuinely funny parts, generally like heartbreaking parts too. And, nice to see these actors play these different roles. That was really fun. And I do, like, I think it's going to be one that people gravitate towards continually. Definitely. Like it's definitely a rewatch.
Cult classic silliness vibes.
Yeah.
Of the 80s. True to the 80s that it was representing.
Yeah. I also love that. Just like the campy, just like absurdity of 80s fashion and pop culture is like one of my favorite things. So
it definitely choose that.
It's fun. Yeah, but why don't we hop in and tell you about Lisa Frankenstein. So Lisa Frankenstein is from 2024, and it's about a coming-of-age love story about a teenager and her crush who happens to be a corpse. After a set of horrific circumstances brings him back to life, the two embark on a journey to find love, happiness, and a few missing body parts. And it's directed by Zelda Williams and written by Diablo Cody, who wrote Jennifer's Body, which is covered several times now. So
we're not allowed to cover it again.
Yeah, we are not. We did twice. We did it. It's done. I think you get it. If you don't, it's not for us anymore.
Someone else can say,
yeah. But yeah, I very much believe Lisa lives in the same world. You know, a generation before Jennifer. Just living her truth, right? So Lisa Frankenstein is a neon-soaked, delightfully twisted horror comedy set in the pastel suburban bliss of the late 1980s that is a journey of self-discovery. The world was definitely giving Edward Scissorhands. Like, not quite as heavy-handed as Edward Scissorhands, where it's like, look at the picturesque world, and he's this little goth boy. Nothing felt like that either. Like, she's misunderstood, but I never felt like it was like being hammered in so hard. She like became more misunderstood as she went.
With time.
But at its heart, Lisa is an awkward, grief-stricken teenager who feels like she doesn't fit in anywhere, not at school or home, and certainly not in her sleepy, image-obsessed town. Very cliche representation. And her classmates are shallow, her family's solutions to her struggles are rushed and tone-deaf, and her only solace is found wandering the local cemetery, where she pours her heart out to the grave of a handsome, long-dead Victorian man who was worthy enough to get a whole bust of himself. There's
Fun fact, I was also a middle school / high schooler who would walk around the cemetery, so I think that is funny.
Yeah, I mean,
awkward. Dancing around the cemetery like a weirdo.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of nods to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, who's birthed the sci-fi and horror genres. She was the first to do it, and she was a child. So when she was young, she would wander around cemeteries and make the rubbings of the names. So it's very, like, you know, referencing that. Because her name is not Frankenstein or Shelley. But she has an Aunt Shelley that she references.
Oh, funny.
But things take a turn for the undead one stormy night when a bolt of lightning strikes her favorite grave, resurrecting the corpse of her Victorian crush. And disoriented and barely stitched together, the creature, as Lisa dubs him, stumbles his way to her house, where Lisa, proving she's not your average squeamish teen, decides to take him in, clean him up, and maybe, just maybe, make him her perfect companion. After all, if she can't find someone who gets her, why not make one? Yep. And I think that scene where she finds him is one of like the best parts, and like in her just running and just destroying everything and just like trying, and like the neighbors are like, yeah, that's just the weird kid.
Yeah, like literally, you said like she could be getting murdered, and they're just like, she's just weird.
She like is, she's screaming. Sometimes kids scream. Yeah. And then like eventually when she find the shoe phone, which it was giving very Juno, just like her just like slumped next to him like, okay. I see. Yeah. We just gotta, this is not the situation I thought it was. Which is cute. I think she's very endearing as like a main character. Like definitely unorthodox, but Still relatable.
Yeah.
Like just for all the weirdo kids out there, she's just like us.
Yeah.
So then we cue the classic 80s makeover montage as Lisa gives the creature a modern update with clothes that scream mall chic, while he silently endures her questionable styling choices. There's like the robe she really likes and silly things. It's cute. And as overdone as the montage has been, it was still pretty cute. It was like Earth Girls Are Easy.
Okay.
They turn all the aliens into hot guys. But I think what's really interesting is she's dressing him, but then in turn he dresses her. So in this like hilarious twist, the next morning she is dressed in like a bold Madonna inspired ensemble that screams confidence and individuality, and it's him being like, girl, like you got to work with what you got, because what are you doing? And so then all of a sudden she's got this confidence, and it really just marks the beginning of Lisa's personal transformation, as her new look empowers her to shed her insecurities and start expressing her in ways that she never dared before. So like we said at the beginning, she's helping him put his body together, but he's helping her put her emotions together.
Yep.
So what follows is a quirky and surprisingly sweet friendship between Lisa and the creature. And despite being nonverbal and missing an ear temporarily, the creature becomes a perfect listener for Lisa's grief and frustrations, a grief that no one else is listening to. And she opens up about that pain and loneliness, finding solace in someone who, despite being undead, seems to genuinely understand her. And their bond grows deeper as they navigate small town gossip, judgmental neighborhoods, and a few accidental murders.
Yep.
What's a good undead love story without a little collateral damage, especially of the people who wronged you? Like, everyone wins, like, besides the villains. In this. And, like, at the end, he was not a villain. No. They just had a goal they needed to do.
Yeah. I just wish they didn't have to hurt Taft specifically. The rest of them, I'm like, all right. Collateral damage. Her, I'm like, oh, she was like sweet though. She just wasn't the brightest bulb, but that's not her fault.
She really was.
She was sweet though.
Very innocent little girl. But as their friendship blossoms and the body count rises, Lisa is faced with tough questions about identity loss and what it truly means to find connection in a disconnected world. And by the end, she's not just embracing her quirky, macabre side, she's fully owning it, advocating for herself and proving that sometimes all you need is to transform into a little self-expression, a lot of courage, and yes, maybe an undead best friend who doesn't mind helping you bury a body or two.
Yep.
Use what you can. With its campy humor, heartfelt moments, and a generous splash of gore, Lisa Frankenstein is a love letter to misfits, weirdos, and anyone who's ever felt like they didn't quite belong. Right? We are the weirdos, mister. Yep. It's a hilarious offbeat romp through grief, friendship, and the messy process of growing up. Right? It's a coming of age. Proving that sometimes finding yourself means raising a little hell or maybe a corpse. And by literally creating someone to fit her ideal, Lisa learns about her own desires, insecurities, and the consequences of trying to shape others or herself to meet unrealistic expectations. Because I think like it's funny and goofy and like silly as some of this premise can be, and how like he's approached, like he's still like she's putting him together. But it was always, he had his own voice the whole time. Yeah. And he, like, gave her his opinion in the ways that he could to her. And he looked out for her. He, like, cared for her. Not just because she was the one who would listen to him, but I think he just genuinely got her. But I think really there is a lot of heart behind this film that, like, you know, first time watching, you're like, what's going on? This is so silly. But then you start listening and you're like, wait a second, this one actually kind of hurt. Because they really like the whole thing is like her grief is that her mom had passed away and she died by being like slasher movie murdered. Yeah. She got like Halloweened. Okay. Yeah. And like this crazy, and it's super silly the way that it happens because it's dark comedy and it's like, ooh, slapstick. But then you're like, wait, her mom like just died.
Yeah. like literally, yeah. And then the dad's like moving on like super fast. Everyone's like, don't feel grief.
Yeah. They're like, get over it. Yeah. And she's in the middle of this very pivotal moment of her life. So it's like, it's very flashy in your face, and then like there are moments where it really hurts and it's hard. And even like you said, Taff, who is her stepsister, it should be, you know, the quintessential like popular girl, whatever, and she's not. She is popular, and she's very aware of her power as a popular, beautiful girl, but she's also so incredibly sweet.
Yeah.
Like she really cares for her in the way that she can, and she also cares for her mom, who's an awful person. Like,
yeah.
you know, it's really sweet. And in an article on Collider titled "There's So Much More to Lisa Frankenstein Than Camp 80s Horror," writer Juliana Salinas offers, "The love Lisa finds helps her out of the depths of her grief, and she gets her happy ending even if it hurts the people she left behind. While she is able to spend the rest of her afterlife with the creature, she leaves her father and stepsister and the families of the victims behind in the depths of mourning and unanswered questions. The end of Lisa Frankenstein, much like the grieving process itself, is complicated, right? Because she has to not live there. She has to give up on a whole life because of decisions she made. But at the same time, she's embracing a life that she feels she's better earned. So overall, Lisa Frankenstein, filled with biting humor, campy thrills, and heartfelt moments, is a quirky tale about self-discovery, acceptance, and the often messy process of creating a connection in a world that feels alienating. They like, what's a Victorian man going to know about the world?
Well, it's not the modern one.
Yeah, but what I really wanted to talk about for my section in this film, because I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about grief, and Kat's going to offer some more information on it, because I think there's always a different way to look at it, right? And I think there's a lot of fun of Lisa Frankenstein. Like I said, there's a lot of references to Mary Shelley. Like there's the one where she has the massager, personal massager, and she's like, "This is for my Aunt Shelley." She said it would like liven me up or something. And just like, haha. So things like that are just like super sweet, and clearly someone who appreciates that history. And I think it's also important to highlight that a woman or a girl started the horror and sci-fi genre. You know, Lisa is the same age as Mary Shelley when she was trapped in a house with a bunch of other writers on a stormy night, where she concocted this, like, why you're playing God kind of message, which I don't think really plays into this. She really wasn't like, I'm playing God. She was just like, oops. I think, and that's the thing, I think, like, it's a moment where she summons him. He gets it's electrocution, and then he comes out, and she's just very candid with him, and she says, when I said I wanted to be with you, it wasn't that I wanted you here alive, it's that I wanted me there dead. Like, I don't want to be here. And like that's like the loudest cry for help. And like we just have to keep moving with the film and like the silliness, but there's always those moments where like we come back to her being like, I'm ready to go, right? And that like that idea of teen suicide and feeling so hopeless and just kind of like pushing through and performing despite all that is the crux of that, and also the crux of Heather's, which I'm going to talk about as well. But I think this idea of like the very heavy things that are placed on young people, right? In when we're treating it this way, in this comedic way, can make it a little bit easier to talk about. And I hope that's what it does. Like, I hope the ending of her not being here anymore isn't seen as the answer, but seen as a question.
Well, it's kind of like a lot of our teen shows or movies that we were watching. Like, it's like a funny talk to me. Where you're dealing with the same themes, it's just presented so differently, and as a way to make it like easier to digest. And I agree, like the end, it's a little scary because you're like, I don't want to promote people not wanting to be here, but I do want to promote them being their most authentic selves. So it's like, in that way, she was doing that. She technically was still alive, kind of like I saw the TV glow, like, you know, like you had to go bury your
had to
old
let
version of herself. To come be herself inhibited by like people who didn't accept her or see her as she was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if we can, media literacy it and say, she was not killing these people, she was killing these relationships, right? She was letting these relationships to die. She was taking what she needed from those relationships and moving on. And then she was letting that version of herself die to then go be her most true, authentic self. And that's what I hope people will see. Or they'll just like, oh, it's cute, they're in love. Like, do that.
Sure.
Like, even do that, but I do think that is an interesting take, because it is like, she's struggling with this idea of like wanting to unalive herself, and it was her mom who was taken from her. And so very similar to that, except like her addiction isn't like, being possessed. It's this undead person and murdering people. So like, so we get the hands that were dealt. But I'll talk about how, again, and we've talked about this before, but when your teen angst bullshit has a body count. So there is a beloved horror subgenre that thrives at the intersection of camp and coming of age, and is the dark comedy slasher. And the campy, dry genre perfectly serves as a metaphor for the emotional turbulence of adolescence. We got hormones, awkwardness, and the messy process of growing up, and they're all reflected in the chaotic, undead antics that unfold. and the very different ways, even though that this film takes place at the same time as Heathers, the fact that it was made now, I think, influences the way that it's told and what it's addressing. Because I think the 80s was like a fun outfit to wear. I don't know if it really was a cultural necessity to the themes the way that Heathers was. So at first thought, Heathers comes to mind when you think of dark comedy teens, right? With its razor sharp satire of high school cliques and the complicated relationship young people have with self-harm, relationships with each other, their family, and essentially coming into adulthood. Then you have Diablo Cody's other film, Jennifer's Body, that also fits smugly within this framework, with its bloody feminist revenge tale wrapped in a demonic possession and unrequited sapphic love story. It's not quite dark comedy in the same way. Like, it doesn't have that same biting wit, but I think it exists in the same space of like teens, graphic violence and horror, and still comedy, because Jennifer's Body's hilarious. I thought you only killed boys. I go both ways. Like, come on. Cody's newest film, created with Zelda Williams, is the newest contribution to the genre of teen angst and growing body counts. And so Lisa Frankenstein, being about this lonely teen resurrecting a Victorian dream guy with a tanning bed, shares that love of dark humor, rebellious protagonists, and twisted takes on teen life that we find in those other films. These films, this genre of films, share an unapologetic, gore-soaked approach to serious themes, right? So alienation, conformity, toxic relationships, earning their place in the hallowed halls of camp. So just, here's a very serious thing that we could just all cry about. And then we do then this really absurd, like, how does the body work way? And it kind of deconstructs something that is otherwise really taboo and hard to approach. And instead it's kind of like, let's have this kind of fun conversation about it. Like, do you ever feel like this? Heathers dissects high school power dynamics with biting wit. Jennifer's Body slays, literally, while exploring betrayal, friendship, and female empowerment. And Lisa Frankenstein reanimates suburban loneliness into a quirky love story that's equal part grotesque and heartfelt. And at the heart of each story are the outsiders who are pushing against societal expectation, right? So in Heathers, we have Veronica, who's a frustrated intellectual. And she's not really that intellectual, but I think it's like she thinks she is. And she's just suffocating in this world of cliques. Like, she has to perform, and she's tired of it. She's so over that she's better than this, while also not being better than it at all, which is really where the beauty comes from. And then Needy in Jennifer's Body is the underestimated best friend who's living in the shadow of her more confident best friend forever, except it is so much more than that. Right? It's that she's, both you know, losing that friend, but she also like never really had her because she was doing the same thing that everybody else was doing, which was like commodifying her, putting her on this pedestal and taking ownership of her. And she never really had like Jennifer never got to own herself until she became a demon, which is crazy because she was occupied by somebody else. And then Lisa and Lisa Frankenstein is the awkward girl next door navigating grief and a craving for connection, while everyone in her life has a rushed, unsupportive answer to how she handles the grief from losing her mother. They're like, you gotta just get moving. And she has those heart-to-hearts with him, where she explains, like, they just expect me to move on. Like, I think of in Princess Diaries when her friend's like, it's been a year or something, where it's like, it's been 4 months, get over your dad dying. It's just like, what? Just like, she's supposed to be the friend.
Legitimately like that, though. I've had that literal thing said to me while I was at work. Like, I was 20, I don't even know, but there's like, it's been however long, like, it's not cute anymore, move on. And I was like, okay,
no,
people suck. Oh,
because you know, like, what people often say, right, is like, grief doesn't go away. You just learn to live with it, right? Like, it's a hole that shrinks, but it's still there. Or you learn how to like put things around it, and you just kind of like, you just learn to live in this new way that is with loss. Like, you live with loss, which can be really like a beautiful thing too, right? To love someone so much that you're affected by loss in that way. But it is something that, like, it is not a rush. You do not just get over it, right? Not if that person meant something to you, like a parent, or like a friend, or like, honestly, anyone, right, that mattered in any way, shape, or form to you that you lose. It's absolutely valid to miss them for as long as you do, and to be like mourning that, going through that loss. So for anyone, especially for her dad to have moved on the way that he did, it was super sketch.
I was like, he murdered her, because like, you know, it's always the husband or whatever. Is what they say. So I was like, you moved on way too fast. You cannot convince me he didn't do it, but whatever.
He was such a regular man. His wife, Carla Gugino, was giving like the fiance from Parent Trap, like, I'm gonna send you away to a boarding school. You know, like, evil stepmom, cliche, but she did it like so well. She
agreed.
Dude, the her oatmeal scene or whatever, no.
Oh my god, I literally covered my eyes because I was like, if I actually I was like, this was the scariest part of the movie. Like,
this like, killing her, fine, okay, but this was the biggest betrayal.
I was
like, you crossed the line.
Even thinking about it, I was like,
you crossed the line.
Gross. It's
anyone who's seen that, just know that it's awful. So what's really important about this genre existing in horror, right, is the way that they can approach these really heavy topics and having it be dark comedy, right? Like, we're, by making it even more dramatic and absurd, like, it just makes it that much more accessible and relatable, even the fact that it's absurd, right? Like, when we're allowed to laugh at some of those really heavy things, it can help us get closer to healing from them. And so each character, like, being these outsiders, right, feels out of place and has to decide to write their own narrative, and whether that's, you know, dismantling the high school hierarchies, or confronting a possessed best friend, or building the perfect boyfriend from the corpses of those who harmed you, each answer leaves a trail of bodies in its wake. But the bodies are symbolic of letting those relationships die. Not the people, but the relationships are the toxic behavior. We're laying those to rest.
The unintended but necessary consequences of our actions.
Yes. And of course, like, quintessential for the dark comedy coming of age is the messy relationships, right? So each film brings a dark, unconventional romance to the table. So, like, Veronica had that really morally murky love affair with JD, and Heather's that's as dangerous as it is thrilling. It's pretty relatable. Like we've had a lot of people have a toxic boyfriend, and you look back and you're like, why did I do that? But the person at that time, you got your blinders on, or you're thrilled by it. There's like an excitement to it. You feel at a level chosen for it, right? Like, or I can fix him. I can literally build him. I could get him a new ear.
Yeah.
Okay, it's fine. He's such a good listener. With just the one, imagine if he had two.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, what I really like about Heather's was like Veronica's sexuality was really embraced. Like it was never, that wasn't the problem. Yeah. That she was like sexually active with JD. It was like this entrapment that she had, like, and being led astray by JD's ideologies, right?
Yeah.
In Jennifer's body, the friendship turned rivalry between Jennifer and Needy drips with tension, both emotional and, let's be honest, very sapphic. But, and that's like Needy's point of view, which if you decide Needy is the protagonist of that, that's her journey, is like confronting her. If you are like me and you see Jennifer as the protagonist, there's also that the toxic expectations that are placed upon Jennifer to be this sexual being, all while still being a high school girl. Yeah. Right. And it's no wonder that she's preying on these boys, or the people who hurt her. Like she is like one of the most tragic characters I can think of. And it like breaks my heart when I think of like who Jennifer is and what happened to her, and how like we don't get her version. Like she's in the background just hurting. She doesn't get to be Lisa Frankenstein. And then you have Lisa Frankenstein, who has a gothic undead love story that's weirdly sweet and hilariously grotesque. And she's just a complicated girl who's obsessed with the macabre. Like I said, making those rubbings on gravestones, and like, you know, she's odd, but still approachable, I think is important. And she is just very much in great need of unconditional love and support that she's not getting. Like, I mean, Taff like definitely like loves and supports her, but not in a way that she needs. Like, her dad isn't. Yeah. And this new stepmom has a lot of conditions, right? Yeah. So that's all she needs. And, you know, to lose her virginity before she dies, which she feels is imminent. These relationships dig into themes of power, connection, and betrayal. And then another key component to these teen tales is the visuals, right? So all three films embraced a heightened aesthetic that goes it like it's heightened gore, and it's like heightened like here's our look. So like Heather's dazzles with its bold bright colors and exaggerated 80s fashion, where the characters outfits act as both armor and masks, symbolizing the performative roles they play in high school's rigid social hierarchy. But even the parents wear specific things, and the words that they use, like all of that is just like a hyperactive version of that time period. Jennifer's body, the aesthetic shifts to small town grunge and bloody carnage, which really mirrors Jennifer's struggle as she exists in a paradox. She's both too old and too young for the traumas that she endures. And the setting, wardrobe, and circumstances underscore the impossible image she's forced to uphold, blending vulnerability with the illusion of power. Because she's like, oh, I'm killing everyone, I'm in power. And it's like, girl. Yeah. You're literally, but like someone's literally inside of you. Yeah. Like, I'm so sorry, babe. Tragic heroes. I wish there an alternative world where she's Lisa Frankenstein, right? Yeah. And even that has like, you know, the early 2000s fashion. Like we all had those little jackets, your little pink jacket. The whole look, I'm like, oh, it brings me back. And then Lisa Frankenstein, right, is a vibrant neon kitsch celebration of the 1980s iconography and pop culture, but beneath its hyper colorful facade lies a poignant story about the deep impact of grief and loneliness. And each film uses its visual style to amplify that tone, making every frame pop with personality. And most importantly, the films are violent. The blood and gore are a stark contrast to the dry humor, right? And Heather's, all the murders are dressed as suicides, which is like the dark comedy take on teen culture, and what was very fascinating at that time period. But they're still very absurd suicides. It's not just a regular run-of-the-mill suicide. It has to be this big performance. And the funerals are a big performance. Jennifer's body really ramps up the gore with Jennifer's demon-fueled killing spree, blending horror with feminist undertones and her like really cool succubus mouth. And all of that. I was like, it seems fun. And then Lisa Frankenstein takes a more playful approach, using its undead antics to explore self-discovery and healing while delivering plenty of laughs. And at the core, all three films tackle themes of identity, rebellion, and the pressures of conformity. And together, these films prove that teen stories don't have to be bubblegum and prom queens. With their sharp humor, unapologetic weirdness, and subversive twists, these three movies offer audiences a darker, smarter, and more thrilling take on growing up. If you love one, you're bound to find something to obsess over in the others. If dark comedy is your thing, and I'm still figuring out if that is for me.
I think I like it. I don't know, to be honest. I think I just I didn't go in with the right headspace. I think I expected it to be more serious than it was, or like I just didn't know anything about it really, other than like I'd heard that it was good. That's all I heard about it. So I think
I want to watch it like more times.
Yeah,
like I would own this.
And I feel like it's going to be important in like a few years. Like I feel like people are going to like look back and be like, that movie was the movie of the 2024s. When did it come out? Was that now?
2020s? Yeah.
2024,
like, You know, I think, it might be like the next generation's Jennifer's Body in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to talk about that and they're going to be like, what even is Jennifer's Body? And then we're going to be back in my day.
Yeah, we're going to be like the people who are like, you've never seen Heather's? And we'll be like, wow, you've never seen Jennifer's Body? That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
You can put respect on Kara Kusama's name.
Yeah. Well, I'll say things. Basically, what I'm going to be talking about is a lot of sort of what you were saying, Gabe, but like basically that the subversion of normalcy is the goal of the film, and a lot of films like it through like the use of grief and comedy. And on the Ghouls, we've talked a lot about grief. We have so many episodes about grief. I can't think of them right now, to be very honest.
That's like horror's favorite thing.
Yeah. It's so much is explored through grief and loss, and horror just is always doing that. And trauma. Most of our episodes tie in trauma in some way. So we've said many things about it. However, I think Lisa Frankenstein opens up a door to a way of healing that we haven't talked about too in depth as a horror-themed podcast, and that is the way specifically comedy can be used as a tool for healing. I feel like we've said it at least partially before, but there is something like cathartic about horror as well as comedy. That's why they kind of like tie well into each other. So one thing that is definitely true about trauma and grief is that the exchange from those experienced is the exchange like of experience that you have, that after you've experienced this loss and trauma, is that you're more likely to have a more honest perspective on the world and how quickly someone can be lost to it. And it has a way of creating humans who like dark humor. I looked it up. I was like doing the research, and it says it's very common that if you've experienced trauma or loss, that you're going to like vibe more with dark humor because it subverts what's expected from society. Essentially, there's also something to be said about the correlation between absurd humor to trauma as well. So Gabe, you do like absurd humor, so maybe that's the trade-off. You know, maybe you got off the train right before dark humor, but like you got the absurd humor trait. But it's essentially when something doesn't make sense, something as deep and profound as loss of someone you love, and when those around you just want you to get back to normal, there's a lot of comfort in the subversion of normalcy, because it like lets you sit with that for a little longer when everyone else is like,
of it.
Get over it, be normal, contribute to society. And then you're like, I am pain. What do you mean? So like any disruption of that can act as like a subversion of that normalcy and can be very comforting. I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I remember distinctly when I was grieving my grandpa, the person who essentially raised me, I handled it rough. I was a whole entire mess. And as a human who largely never let anyone witness them experience emotions, in my youth specifically, adult me has stayed emotional. me being a mess was like a really jarring and uncomfortable thing for other people to witness. People would get really uncomfortable around my grief. That was the instance where the person was like, "It's not cute. Can you please stop? Like, you're at work." Yeah. And I was like, "I'm 20. What do you want from me?" But people would get really uncomfortable around my grief, and I feel like that's something that like Lisa is experiencing in the film. And I could sense them wanting me to stop talking about it, or wanting me to just go back to answering good when they asked how I was doing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that demand to return to normalcy after something so abnormal has happened to you can be really uncomfortable. And I really appreciate that being shown how it was in the film. I felt it was very accurate. Like in terms of horrific ways to lose someone, axe murder is pretty high on the list.
Yeah, in front of you.
And like expecting her to just be like, "It's fine, I could just go back to high school and like make friends and like be regular." Like, what do you mean? That was super absurd.
The stepmom to be like, "You're acting out by doing this thing again," and not being like, why would she ever even do that? Like, I don't think her brain could ever concoct that. Like, that has messed her up.
It's very much like, I had to deal with this in this way, so everyone else has to, kind of thing. Like, I struggled, so everyone else should. It was very... I believed her that she would think that way, considering the time period. But it was super silly. It was like, what do you mean? It was very absurd. So this demand to return to normalcy, essentially, is a really unfair expectation of society. And when your personhood is defined by what you can produce under capitalism and contribute, your ability to fall in line, especially like in high school when they're like, hammer the nail down, just be normal, get a job, keep moving, grief can really act as a form of protest against that system, or at least be perceived that way by people viewing it. They want you to not do it. They want you to get over and keep going. So absurd things like dark humor can appear as a really refreshing break from the normalcy we're forced to operate under. So Zelda Williams, who is Robin Williams' daughter, also describes this in a Rolling Stones article titled "How Zelda Williams Found Humor in Trauma with Lisa Frankenstein," saying, "I think my sense of humor was shaped by a lot of trauma. I find a lot of humor in darkness, and I want to make things lighter for other people. Aspects of that definitely carry over into this movie. We spend so much time trying to make the way we navigate anything more palatable to others, especially women. Lisa gets to do the opposite of this." And I think even like recognizing like my own stuff, like maybe part of why I didn't like it is because I wasn't expecting the unpalatableness to exist so boldly, because she was doing a lot, you know. She was murdering people, and I was like, oh, I'm starting to lose empathy. Like, I first very empathy, and then you murdered a lot of people and hurt a lot of people, and now I'm like, I get why, but also maybe let's not do that. But that was also like, I'm not saying like I should accept the fact she murdered a bunch of people, but you know, she was being very unpalatable. She was grieving loud and in an unexpected way, and that like there's no good way to grieve. Sometimes it is just messy. And like
she was lashing out.
Yeah. So essentially making grief palatable is something lots of outsiders expect from a grieving person. And it's an unfair expectation. So it was cool to see an unpalatable expression of grief in such like a comedic and like over the top absurd way. So it's also to say like suppressing grief only hurts, like, you know, when you do what everyone's saying, like, hey, stop feeling, that only hurts the person more, because repression of emotions can damage both the mind and body. There's literal science behind that. I can't remember what episode we talked about it, but I go in depth on that multiple times. So it's like pushing it down won't make it go away. It just makes it pop up in ways that can't be ignored. So like illness or damaging coping mechanisms like drugs or alcohol or murder, you know, unlikely to be murder, but here we are. As an added bonus, comedy and dark humor can actually help the healing process by providing a psychological and emotional release, kind of like what you were saying, Gabe. Like when individuals engage with comedic content or dark humor, it can trigger the release of endorphins, which are neurotransmitters that act as a natural painkiller and mood elevator. And this release can lead to a temporary reduction in stress and anxiety, offering individuals a respite from the emotional weight of trauma. And if you think of like who this film's coming from, like Robin Williams' child, that's really what his vibe was. He was like, very much, I want to heal people, be funny so that we don't have to feel sad. And like, I think it does. I mean,
that's what he was doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And because he was so sad. So it's like the influence of that. You can definitely feel that in the film. And I think it really adds to it. So humor can also, Gabe, you mentioned this, add a cognitive shift on how people will perceive their traumatic experiences. Like it really just like reshapes how we cope with things. And it offers like a respite for this trauma. And by finding humor in challenging situations, individuals may be able to reframe their narratives, viewing their experiences from a different angle. And this framing can contribute to a sense of empowerment and control, potentially reducing the emotional impact of the trauma. Everyone copes with trauma differently, so it's kind of like each person will experience it how they do. But it is common for comedy to be a form of like release for these really hard emotions. And additionally, as we see films do often, comedy and dark humor can create a sense of connection and community. So sharing a laugh with others can foster social bonds and provide a shared experience of relief and joy. It's kind of like the way horror is cathartic, is that you have like that community that you build from those experiences. And this communal aspect of humor can be particularly beneficial in the healing process, as it offers people a sense of support and understanding. So like you see something funny happen, you may be able to be more open with those around you. And it's important to recognize that the effectiveness of comedy and dark humor in healing trauma can also vary among people. While some may find these forms of humor helpful, others may not resonate with them, which is kind of maybe why we don't always love the dark humor. But I get why people like it. It's just maybe not for me. And therefore, it's essential to approach the use of humor specifically with sensitivity and respect for individual preferences and boundaries. So it's like not comedy, and like the quality of it really depends. It's a subjective thing, because some people are going to think certain things are funny versus not. And just trying to be respectful of like what actually might hurt versus help, even though the intentions are good. But I don't think this film ends up harming anybody. I think it was just like really out there and absurd, which is cool. When used thoughtfully and in a supportive environment, comedy and dark humor can serve as a valuable tool for navigating the complexities of trauma and continuing the healing process. So if that was Zelda's goal, I think she does achieve it, which is cool. They also speak in the Rolling Stone article about how like writing was a big part of their grieving process. So like specifically like after their dad died, they wrote obsessively. They wrote all the time. And that was like a big part of them processing their grief. And that's actually like scientific. And as someone who also does this, Zelda's why for writing after the loss of her father resonated with me, because writing has always been a point of healing for me. And in the creation of like a webtoon and songwriting, they both act as like a processing of trauma. And I've experienced this in creating, like taking something really awful and transforming it into something beautiful or creative can be really cathartic, because you're like, oh, I've taken this awful thing and this pain I've experienced and made it into something beautiful that other people can enjoy. And that can really make it, not that like it's worth it, but like kind of makes it feel like, oh, this helped me create something I wouldn't have been able to create otherwise. And that means something. And it's also like a way of like prolonging legacy and memory of those experiences. And yeah, it just makes something more beautiful than its root cause. And this is apparently scientific, as writing and creative activities can play a crucial role in the healing process of trauma and grief. Expressive writing specifically has been shown to have therapeutic benefits. When individuals write about their traumatic experiences, it can help them process and make sense of their emotions. This process of emotional expression through writing can lead to a reduction in stress, anxiety, and depressive symptoms, and it can contribute to an increased sense of well-being and improved mood. So kind of like the endorphins thing. Engaging in creative activities such as art, music, crafting, it can provide individuals with a nonverbal outlet for expressing their emotions. And this form of expression can be particularly beneficial for individuals who find it challenging to articulate their feelings through words, like out loud. And creative activities allow individuals to externalize their emotions, providing a tangible representation of their internal experiences. This process can lead to a sense of catharsis and emotional release, potentially reducing the emotional burden associated with the trauma. From a neurodivergent perspective, it can also act as like a great stim or a physical outlet for the feelings. And it's also like, there's literally in neurodivergence, there's like a thing, I forget what it's called right now, but it's where you don't always realize what you're feeling when it's happening in your body. And it's really hard to like identify what emotions that you're feeling and process them. Writing can act as like a way to process those emotions for people who process through talking about them or like don't feel till they've gotten it out through words. Writing can stimulate that, and it's also kind of meditative. When writing about things that were traumatic or felt out of your control, being the narrator of that story of what happened can return some of that control too. If writing creatively, it can provide a path to like different endings too. So like growth in characters that didn't get to experience that in reality, and other forms of like catharsis. So like if they didn't get a happy ending in their life, you could write one. Or if something happened and you just was the worst, you wish it happened a different way, you could write that. You're in control of what you're writing, and that kind of like makes you the narrator of your own story. And when you've experienced something like really uncontrollable and traumatic, that can be really healing. Because of this, writing and creative activities can facilitate a sense of empowerment and control, and this empowerment can be instrumental in the healing process, fostering resilience and a positive sense of self. Moreover, writing and creative activities can promote mindfulness and self-reflection. Essentially, it's like very meditative to write. Like my mom talks about that, where she like writes all the time, like so much. And I think it's literally like a meditation for her. So engaging in these activities encourages individuals to be present in the moment and connect with their inner experiences. It's like a very like self-reflective, self-aware experience where you actually can experience emotional regulation in real time. It allows people to develop a deeper understanding of their emotions and thought patterns too, because then you have like a record. You're like, oh, I can go back and see like for the last 3 weeks I've been sad. I maybe should go talk to somebody. Versus like if you're just living day to day, you might have like kind of like an unawareness to the fact that you're sad, because it kind of all blurs together. And it also can provide people with like a break from intrusive thoughts and rumination associated with trauma, because you're like kind of focusing on the moment instead of just like going in a brain spiral. And overall, writing and creative activities offer specific and tangible benefits in the healing of trauma. They provide individuals with diverse avenues for emotional expression, empowerment, and self-discovery. And it basically contributes to their overall well-being and resilience in the face of these events. So like, the fact that Zelda is a writer makes sense. The fact that a lot of creative people have experienced some variety of trauma or loss or hardship is telling. Like, it's very real. It's a big way to process what you're going through and heal from it. So that part's dope.
Yeah. And we've definitely, talked about how horror can kind of tickle the same things that comedy does, because it has that same like rising action and release that just lets you kind of work through it. And horror, like when it has a happy ending, sometimes a little less like a happily ever after ending, but still like a happy enough ending, that can feel really like a release too. Like we got through it, we endured it, but we got through that. It acknowledges that we change when things happen to us, but we persevere. We always joke that like there's a ghouls for that. When it comes to grief, there are ghoulses for that.
We talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and we have episodes on Heather's and Jennifer's Body if you want to check those out to learn more about those films. We have, like we said, plenty on grief. I think Our Haunting of Hill House has some really amazing parts about grief, because that's all the stages of grief. We have I'm Totally Fine, I think it was. About her friend who died, and it was like the alien takes on her shape. That was such a great exploration of grief. Even Megan had some really interesting points to make about children in grief. Like, listen, we've talked about it. Talk to me, talking about grief in teens, and that really quintessential part of growing up and losing someone and not having the support systems. Unconditional love that you need during that time. And so, it could take a lot of different forms, and I think giving people the space and the time that they need to work through that is what's really important. you know, it's over a year since I lost my grandmother, and that's still like they're just just the other day I was just looking out the window and I was like, I really miss my grandmother. Like, just feeling that. And that's like not gonna just go away one day, you know. And I know that it's affecting you and other, you know, members of my family even more, and who interacted with her more. Like, if I'm feeling this, you know, like I would absolutely want to make sure that they feel comfortable to do that. And I've, you know, experienced all kinds of loss, and I know how like absolutely derailing and detrimental it can be to your health and like your understanding of the world and your place in it. So yeah, I do think like being able to laugh and hold space for that and like be with them in a unique way is also really important. And so I think Lisa Frankenstein, like, for all its silly antics, it is a really funny film. I think what got me and what made it hard to like just truly resonate with it is the existence of Taff. I think she really messed me up. And similar to like how I can't fully care for Needy because I care so much about Jennifer and what her story is. Like Taff just feeling that emotional loss from her mom, being such a genuinely good person. Like, she did try. She did honestly care about Lisa and was totally wrecked and did not need to be. But that's just like that. I mean, that happens. Like, hurt people, right? And when she was like forced to, like, Lisa was forced to kind of shut all of that out, and she finally just like exploded and let all that out and was hurting all of these relationships, there's gonna be like, you know, debris. There's gonna be like an aftermath, and like innocent parties are gonna be hurt sometimes. And it just, for me, I wanted, and I know Lisa tries in the end, and she, you know, apologizes. She said, I get it, you really did care about me. I just feel like there could have been a little more acknowledgement of the pain she caused for her, and taking responsibility. And she's a teen, so she's not gonna fully do that.
Well, because it's like her trauma that she experienced, she basically put on to somebody else, like gave them a very similar story, like a horrific and graphic death for their mom while they weren't in the room, but like still it's very cyclical, and you're like, oh, I really wish that it didn't happen exactly like that. Like, the mom sucked, yes, but like,
but we don't know anything about Lisa's mom.
She
could have sucked too.
She could have. It's just, it's just, I agree. I think the Taff thing, like, it just made it hard for me to root for Lisa as hard as I think I would have otherwise, specifically because like it was like the reciprocal harm that she was causing, and I was like, oh.
Because Taff was hurting. She was trying. She was so panicked. Like, I've been like, she triggered some responses for me. Like, her calling everywhere, trying to figure it out. I was like, girl. And it's like, I do like, and it's no like shade to the film for doing that. I think it's brilliant that it included that, right? Because I think it's so easy. Like, they so easily could have just labeled her as generic cheerleading rude girl, right? They could have labeled her that. We could have, like, she could have not really cared about her mom. We could have just had her mom be like the evil stepmom that we lose, like she's just collateral damage, like we're glad she's gone kind of thing. By not doing that, by instead like making her seem like a person and making it really real, I think grounded it. And I think that's something that just Diablo Cody does, right? Is like, these characters are all, they're not one-dimensional. Like, even the ones we just get a few moments with, you get little like insight into who they are and what their motivations are and what they're doing here. I think that like the boy who he's a like he's a teen boy, so shouldn't be murdered. But having repercussions for his actions, absolutely. The first boy.
I agree.
Totally repercussions for his actions, for sure. And I'd say he's the one we didn't get a background for. Like, he was just skeevy, you know? But I think it, like, by making Taff that and making it so that we couldn't fully root for Lisa was super intentional. And does show like that sometimes we do have collateral damage. We hurt people. We leave people in the wake of trying to heal. Because you become a hedgehog, right? You want to be close to people, but you're hurting them.
Yeah. Even like after Lisa is like presumed dead, she like still goes to the grave.
Yeah.
You know, just like
with her stepdad that she's like, she totally loves that guy. She's like, take it in, you're my dad now. She's just so sweet. Yeah. Even knowing all of that. Absolutely. So I think like that alone, like Taft changed the whole film for me. And I think in really the best of ways. So like one, it just like it made the dark comedy feel so much darker and heavier. And I think I will say, as far as like dark comedy goes, it is way more accessible to me and like understandable than Heather's was. I think Heather's was just
agree.
I was like, I don't give any care about these kids. Like, they're just so pompous and just fighting with them. And that was the point. And I get that's the point. So anyone who's yelling at me on the internet, I get that's the point. I can still not like it.
That's allowed.
I'm still really allowed. But it was really funny. I think I'm going to come back around and say I actually did really enjoy Lisa Frankenstein. Yeah. And it would be a dark comedy I do like. It's just like a dry humor sometimes. I just don't...
I think we just have to watch it again, like knowing what it's going to be, and I think we'll like it a lot more, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, that was our second episode of our Monstrous Love series. We have some more coming for you. Let us know what you think about Lisa Frankenstein, how you feel about Diablo Cody's other film, Jennifer's Body. Do you love Heather's? Are there dark comedies where you're like, no, you have to give this a shot, Gabe? Yeah. You just
change your mind.
It wrong. Totally, like, change my mind. Convince me of the ulterior is what you said once in an episode. Yeah. Cool. Convince me of the ulterior. So do that. And then remember to like and subscribe. We love hearing from you guys.
We do. And the comments make our day.
Yeah, don't get married.
Or bring me a lot of anxiety. All right. Don't get married, delete your kids. Yep.
Delete your kids. Or you get murdered by an axe.
Hopefully not. An axe
serial killer.
Yeah.
And then your kid, like, my kid would. My kid would spend a lot of time in the cemetery.
Yeah.
And like I'd be like
as a former cemetery kid, probably the same.
So go hang out in the cemetery with your kids. Some rubbing,
scrippy
thing with the dead there, because they were somebody. Yeah. All right.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.